the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu. And I'm that spitter, baby, they don't want you to see, but everybody south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and ponder getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That trade season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my own flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on. To the Hersey, party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I'll probably crack in my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete, I'm a verbal athlete. Deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building. My whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday to all of you out there. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I'm your co-host, Trey Holiday, and it's a beautiful Tuesday out there, and even more beautiful in here in the studio with my co-host, Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday.
I'm just saying, I see you with the suit jacket with the button up today.
I mean, I was trying to step it up to you, and today you in the t-shirt.
Yeah, because I was trying to match you. You know what I'm saying?
We're going to have to coordinate.
We're going to have to coordinate.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Morning Update Show and remind you that right now is the perfect opportunity to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share the stream with people who you feel would appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the Emerald City. Before I go any further, big shout out to our expanding audience up to Anchorage, Alaska, Vancouver, British Columbia, Walla Walla, Washington. I don't know if that's in the pen or out of the pen or both. Portland, Eugene, Northern California, man. I mean, people are tuning into the Morning Update Show. And Trey Holiday, we got a good show lined up here today. We have Jenn Smith, and we have Melissa Hellmann joining us from the Seattle Times, and they're talking about that Zoom bombing that we was talking about yesterday.
Oh, man, I'm ready to get into it, man. People have been experiencing this in a wide variety of sectors, so I'm glad they wrote on it. I'm glad they're here to talk about it today.
Yeah, no, we got a lot of time dedicated to the conversation with Jenn and Melissa, a real in-depth reporting that they did there. Also, I caught up with not superintendent, maybe not yet, but What's he called?
School board director.
Director.
Yeah,
Oh,
go.
man. I gotta get more sleep. School board director for District 7, Brandon Hersey. Talked to him about first day back for grades 6 through 12, how that's going, and then also what parents can expect in Seattle Public Schools. And, you know, I was in Chicago over the weekend. I caught up with Omi. Yeah. And so we got an edition of Struggle Meals Without the Struggle. There's no cooking in this episode. He was actually in his craft. He was out there shooting some video in Chicago. So we're going to check in with that as well.
Oh, looking forward to it. And every time we can get an update from Omi down there in Chi-Town, it's exciting time.
In the Chi. All right. So, you know, Trey Holiday, I really wanted to get into something here. Is that last week, it was 1 week ago, a real emotional show. I think that our viewers remember how emotional it was a week ago, and really how basically the trauma of continuously reporting on these issues, whether it's police violence or violence in our community, how it's compounding. And I want to play this clip from last week. This was 1 week ago, the 13th, right here on the Morning Update Show. The National Association of Black Journalists gave guidelines to Black reporters and like therapy hotline, everything else, because of the added trauma that Black media people have reporting on this George Floyd trial. And he said the people who are actually watching the trial every day, you've seen George Floyd murdered over 100 times. You know what I'm saying? And you know, this has been impactful, man. And it's crazy because in a way, I've been more impacted by a lot of these things outside of Seattle than even in Seattle. But even as Black media, this shit is traumatizing, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, damn, people just, they don't get it. And you feel like it's the knee on our neck. You know what I'm saying? It's the knee and Trey Holiday.
It is tough. We talk about it after the show, but we try not to go too deep because we know the next day we got to talk about it again. And we have to be here again for our community, doing community news, reporting on things like this, reporting on white kids getting off when they threaten to kill our babies, reporting on Black folks dying constantly dying, gun violence, police brutality. It gets to a point where you're like, man, at what point will the scales tip enough to where people are like, you know what, like, we really can't do this anymore. We really can't do this.
An emotional show last week, Trey.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, emotional show. And, you know, the truth of the matter is we know we're not alone. We know we're not alone dealing with this, as so many people across this world are experiencing very similar reactions that we also had.
Yeah, and the reason why I went back in there and grabbed that clip from last week is I saw a real interesting clip this morning from CBS this morning. And Gail was sitting there talking about the trauma that Black people experience watching these murders over and over again, and how it's impacted. And Gail also shared that her, as a member of the media, how she's like, she keeps it bottled in, like we were talking about. And then when you finally let it out, it's just tears everywhere. Play that clip, all you.
We are learning how high-profile racial incidents involving violence affect the mental health of Black Americans. A new study finds that Black Americans reported poor mental health in weeks when 2 or more anti-Black incidents occurred, and when national interest surrounding the events was higher. White Americans' mental health was not significantly impacted. Wisdom Powell is director of the Health Disparities Institute at the University of Connecticut, where she is also an associate professor of psychiatry. Good morning to you, Wisdom Powell. It's very good to see you. I think this is...
Good morning.
I think this is a perfect Good morning. There's a little bit of a delay, so we'll have to work with that. But I think this is a good time to have you here, because I think yesterday during the closing arguments, that tape was played of George Floyd's death, the before, the after, and the during, that I think has been very triggering for a lot of people. And one person said to me, not only is that triggering, but the defense of trying to explain it has also been triggering to defend that kind of behavior. What do you say to that?
I absolutely agree. The thing about racism in general is that it is a biopsychosocial stressor. And incidents like being in a courtroom and repeating the exposure to those 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and now we know 9 minutes of George Floyd's demise can be triggering for everyone who is exposed to it. And so there is a consequence of having that be replayed in an open court.
You say, Wisdom, that we pass on trauma from generation to generation. What do you mean?
So, you know, there's new evidence to suggest that not only do we transmit the ways that we cope with stress and trauma across generations, but that we actually embody that stress genetically, and that we can pass that on in our DNA to those in subsequent generations. But here's the other part of it. What it really means is that if we don't do the healing work, the racial healing work now, that generations, our children, their children's children, and their children will have to do the emotional work.
And, you know, I had a friend, because I have to tell you, I'm surprised at myself at how deeply this has affected me. I think that you keep so much in, and then you start talking about it, and before you know, the floodgates are open. And I had a white friend of mine say, you know, how do you feel? I go, not so good. Better question is, how do you feel?
There we go. You caught me off camera, but it's all good. I think that, like I said, the one thing that really caught my eye with this clip was that we're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we aren't. And Gail said it best there, because so many of us, especially those in media, I think, you know, she's really hitting the nail on the head here. We bottle it up. We bottle it up. You know, I try to find my own ways through meditation and everything else to really, you know, keep my peace and keep my calm and build up my divine nature around these things. But I understand how we need practices around this. And I think she's right. A lot of people are bottling it up, especially those in media.
I mean, I had to play this clip before the show for you.
Yeah.
To prepare you. And when I played it beforehand, you know, it actually brought tears to your eyes.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know what I'm saying, to see 1 week ago, like, I mean, I was ready to just walk off the set and keep walking, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that day was a tough day. And every time I think about what our babies are having to face, because this is things that are plastered over social media, constant barrage of imagery that is really showcasing people that look like them dealing with all of this violence, particularly when it comes to police brutality. I mean, we see it splattered everywhere, man. And then you got people able to threaten our babies and get away. I mean, it's just constant, really.
Our mental health, I mean, let's be clear. And I mean, further on in the interview, and it was a pretty good interview there this morning. The guest there, Wisdom, she actually talked about, like, America as a whole, people have been impacted, but, you know, especially the mental health of Black people and this trial. And it's like deja vu all over again, in a sense, because that week leading up to the murder of George Floyd, the news was really breaking nationally about Ahmaud Arbery. We'd actually been reporting on it, right? There was Ahmaud Arbery that was making it to the national scene. There was the Black bird watcher who was there in Central Park and had the police called on him. The news about Breonna Taylor was making it to the national scene, and then George Floyd's murder. And it's crazy because, like, a year later, we're seeing that it's like, okay, well, man, everybody's on edge about the verdict. And here's Dante Wright. Here's all these other things that are happening. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think that to what Wisdom was talking about there is trauma. That is something that is newer evidence, but a lot of people have known that for generations, man, in our community. And really, Black people have been dealing with historical traumas ever since they call it a post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Where it's like still dealing with so many things that are really within our DNA.
Well, I mean, it's in children, what you hit on there is our kids learn so much from us. They learn how a lot of things, how to cope and navigate through life. And if we don't necessarily have the coping skills because of this compounding trauma that we deal with, it's never resolved. And then again, you know what I'm saying, our children aren't seeing how these traumas are resolved. So this is a conversation that's definitely going to continue. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we have Jenn Smith, and we also have Melissa Hellmann from the Seattle Times, and they're going to be talking about racist Zoom bombing. Man, remember when we put in the song, I Just Want to Live?
Yeah.
It was like, man, I just want to live. I don't want nothing. I just want to live. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. This is Brother Ali from Black Action Coalition. We would like to invite you to the Black Health and Wealth Event, Sunday, April 25th, 12 to 5, Seattle, Washington, Jefferson Park, Beacon Hill. At this event, you will find healing circles, job resources and training, wellness connection, housing resources, art, music, free food, and me, Brother Ali.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. Forgot to tag this at the top of the show, but just a reminder that right now, anybody in the state of Washington, 16 and over, you're eligible for the vaccine. We'll put the link there in the comments for the vaccine finder. For anybody who wants to get the vaccine, you're eligible if you're 16 and older. Also, if someone's telling you to Cash App them for the vaccine, it's a scam. Don't Cash App, no Venmo, and also ain't nobody delivering the vaccine to your house. So you know what I'm saying. If you're getting those, stay away from them. Man, you know, this is something that I know you've experienced. I've been fortunate enough. I stay away from Zoom, by the way. I get enough crazy stuff in the comments, just and Twitter and everything else. But I know this is something that's impacted you, and it turns out quite a few people. And we're going to get into it. Oh, yeah, the Alessandro. If you can please bring in Jenn Smith and Melissa Hellmann. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. We'll start with you to kick it off, Melissa. Tell us what this article, and actually, if you can put the article in the comments, tell us what this article is all about.
Sure. So in a nutshell, we reported for a couple of months on Zoom bombing here. Excuse me, I got some of my morning smoothie stuck in my throat. We reported on Zoom bombing that happens in Washington State. So Zoom bombing, it's when people hijack a Zoom recording that's happening where people are meeting, and they'll hijack it by inserting material that's often racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, or pornographic. And so research has shown that this has become increasingly targeted towards marginalized communities. So we spoke with researchers, civil rights organizations, politicians, also a psychologist, and lawyers, and we found that there's scant recourse for people who are targeted by these incidents. So there's been a call from people who've been targeted by these incidents to have increased education to prevent the attacks, also for there to be greater enforcement and more legal protections for people so that they can actually hold these people accountable who are hijacking.
Oh, wow. Melissa, thank you for that. And, the thing is I've experienced it. Jen, I know that you have personally experienced this as well. What was that like for you? And give us some details on that.
Yeah, so that was sort of how I started looking into this and working with Melissa. It was just a regular day back in February. I work with the Seattle Times Education Lab, and so I was going to meet with some students from the Seattle University Black Student Union to hear about this great scholarship fund that they were putting together to advance Black students who might not otherwise have the means. And, just a few minutes into that meeting, suddenly everything changed on the screen. There were people, a lot more, about twice as many people who were there who weren't there before. And, some of these attackers are anonymous, but in this case, some people weren't turning off their cameras and they were shouting the N-word. They were blowing up the chat with just things like N-words must die and things that just, take us all, even though it's happened, as in your last segment mentioned, for years, this kind of language goes around, but this is a new platform that's being utilized in a coordinated way. It's not just one person. There's 15, in some cases, in one case of a documented incident, there were 51 people. Imagine if that happened in a real room. That's what really got me. And it's not just about reporting on these one incidents, but taking a bigger picture look and saying, how does this affect us? How does this affect us emotionally? How does this affect us from a cybersecurity standpoint? Who's accountable for that? And so that's where this whole big line of weeks and weeks of asking questions and looking at this issue came about. It was a little personal because I experienced it firsthand, and you feel kind of helpless. And you hear that word, but it stings in a new way.
Yeah. So Melissa, in your reporting, I see that Zoom bombing isn't just resigned to just community groups and students. You also talk about the Kent Chamber of Commerce and even council member Gurmai Zahalai, who's actually been on the Morning Update show quite a few times.
Right. So I spoke with Zenobia Harris she's the CEO at the Kent Chamber of Commerce. And so back in July, she was holding an event that was for retailers to try to get them adjusted to COVID-19 to follow protocol. And then shortly after starting the video for this, she had let some people in who, since it's an open forum, anyone is allowed to get in. The link was published online and it was easily accessible to anyone. Some people came in and they hijacked the meeting and they started saying racial slurs against Black people and Asian people. And then they also started playing a video on loop of a Black woman being hung. This was especially traumatizing for Zenobia, who's a Black woman, and she's actually the first Black person to lead the chamber, and it's over a 70-year history. So she was really concerned that maybe this was personally addressed toward her, that maybe they knew that there was a Black CEO, and that's why they came in and hacked the meeting in this way. And also it happened shortly after Breonna Taylor was killed by police in Kentucky. So this just made her feel unsafe, and she was concerned about even going into her work after that. So I spoke with her, and she told me it really felt like PTSD for her. And after speaking with a psychologist, Monica Williams at University of Ottawa, she looks at race-based stress and trauma, and she's been looking at online harassment. And She said that this can really push someone over into a PTSD reaction, especially if you're already in a marginalized community or if you've experienced microaggressions or racism in the past. This can affect you in a way even deeper than it would someone who maybe isn't part of a marginalized community and hasn't experienced all of this trauma. So I spoke with them, and then I also talked with Gurmai Zahile, as you mentioned, who's a council member for King County Council, as well as John Taylor, and he's the director of local services. That's like the government arm for the unincorporated King County. So there was a Bryn Mawr Skyway meeting that was held. It was a town hall meeting that was held back in October. And so people were just doing business as usual. And then I think they said about a dozen people came in. They started playing heavy metal music. And then they started just barraging the chat with the N-word. And they put it in the chat box, just repeatedly put the N-word. And so they were able to eject the people from that conference. And then afterwards, John Taylor, he put up a poem, Song of Myself by Walt Whitman, which is a really lengthy poem. He put that in the chat box just to obscure the N-word from view. But yeah, so our research showed that this is just happening across the board to people in government and student unions.
Wow. I mean, what a wide breadth of ways that they're coming in. And Jenn, you spoke earlier about some folks, not being anonymous here. So is there some reporting or something that is really lets us understand who's doing this?
Right. So there, as with a lot of these things, because they're developing so much in real time, there isn't a ton of research, but I was able to find a few things. So one, there was a study that came out from Boston University and Binghamton University that followed the particular trend that, when the FBI really first caught notice of this trend of Zoom bombing, especially as more people migrated online for work, for school, for worship, back in March 2020. It used to be only a single person. And what this research found is that there's this very intentional practice of a person, and sometimes that person is inside that classroom or inside that meeting group. So they legitimately get access to the link, and then they'll go to a place. They found some evidence on Twitter, a lot of evidence on 4chan of people sharing out the link, sharing the password, and even coaching people and saying things like, my teacher will know if you put this name. So here's the name of someone in my class. So again, this is very intentional. And then they're recruiting people to basically attack or raid a classroom or a meeting space, which definitely raises red flags. The problem with tracking that is that sometimes people can use things like proxy servers, obviously fake names. If you look at incidences are reported, you can Google search it and find articles. You'll hear people using fake names. So it's really hard to kind of track down. But when you are, if people do find your IP address and track you down, then there are different tiers of crimes and charges that could be potentially brought up if that evidence is there. And that's another reason why there's a call from researchers and these community groups have been affected to have more legislation and policy around these issues. So there is more recourse and connection to these, what could be crimes, and definitely from what feels for people who have been targeted, there's real pain there. There's real trauma that's created, and it's hacking and not hacking, but infiltrating a device, a space that's supposed to be for a specific group and not these intrusive outsiders.
Right. Yeah. One of the things we see here is that when it comes to Zoom bombing, that this is difficult to prosecute, and you talk about there's a call for legislation. I know that both of you did some follow-up. We'll start with you first, Jen. When you talk about the case there at Seattle University and down in Thurston County, and then Melissa, maybe you could chime in as to investigations there at the Seattle Police Department and King County Sheriff.
Right. So as far as the schools go, we also talked about an incident that happened back in November at Gonzaga University. And they've actually at Gonzaga, they've been keeping a blog and different updates of their cases. You can find it online. And unfortunately, there's still not much progress in the case. So again, these things take time. So like the 2 Black student union presidents I spoke to who are seniors, they're graduating this spring, congratulations to them. But unfortunately, they're going to graduate without any recourse from these incidents, most likely. And in the case of the North Thurston School District, there was follow-up. The school's like internet security director was able to trace an IP address to actually a school in a neighboring district. And so there was some student involvement. But what happens there is that, the North Thurston district doesn't have jurisdiction over the other districts. So basically you have to ask, the other district to discipline a student or a perpetrator. And then when does it become a matter of, especially with a young person, if it's just a disciplinary action, or if it's determined that there's an actual a crime. In some other cases that happened earlier on back in 2020, when there were more singular incidents, not coordinated incidents, some students have been previously arrested.
And Melissa?
So Zenobia Harris did not report the incident to the Kent Police Department because she wasn't sure if anything would happen from it, and she felt like maybe they had bigger things to be concerned about. I did speak with the Seattle Police Department to see what their policy is on these events, if they track them, and also if there's any department that's looking into this. And they gave me very little information because they said that they had 3 open cases that were possibly Zoom bombing attacks. And they basically just said that they encourage people to contact law enforcement if this happens. And then with the King County Sheriff's Office, so for the Skyway event that happened where people were Zoom bombed during the town hall, there was actually a King County Sheriff's Office representative who was part of the call. They're always part of the town hall events that are put on by the local services department. And so they followed up on the event. They tried to investigate it, but a representative there told me that they weren't able to pursue the case because no person would come forward who was targeted by this, who wanted to see the case through to legal proceedings. And at least from the King County Sheriff's side, they said that that's really the problem in being able to prosecute people, is that they said that it's difficult to find people who will see the legal proceedings through.
Well, you guys also really continued on with the legalities of this. Jen, I know you were looking at it from a federal level. You spoke to the FBI, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with the FBI because, again, as I mentioned before, back in March 2020, they did recognize that this was a growing trend, that many people were being affected across state lines. And so they put out some guidance. They were reminding people to password protect their meetings, which actually did kind of create this cascade of holding Zoom and other online platforms more accountable. More people were using Zoom, so they tend to happen there, but no platform is immune. So again, these things happen, but the FBI, when I asked them if they were tracking these incidents, they said they didn't really give me an answer. So I can't say definitively whether they are or they aren't. And if they are tracking this growing trend that the researchers found of specifically coordinated attacks. And again, these coordinated attacks, if you look anecdotally at other news reports of these incidents happening, they tend to be targeting marginalized communities. So whether it's Black student unions, I know during some LGBTQ awareness events, that community was attacked during International Women's Month in March. There were some women's groups reported being, having their meetings hijacked as well. So there's definite signs that this is, happening. In addition to the research that, again, that there are some insider advantages of sharing this, what should be private meeting information. So even if you do password protect, people are finding, these attackers are finding other ways to infiltrate meetings. So I'm hoping, and I'm wanting to see more guidance and protocols and what's happening, and to see more data. I think that was the one thing we also really struggled to find. But if we look at other issues of security in this country, like being a school reporter, I looked at school shootings, and that was something that wasn't really tracked very well until some grassroots groups really got involved.
Right. And now, Melissa, you followed this up on the state level, and I see that you talked to the Anti-Defamation League. What's some of the information that you were able to get in regards to legalities here in the state of Washington?
Yeah, so the Tech Policy and Advocacy Council, Lauren Kraft from the Anti-Defamation League, she told me from a federal standpoint that there are several laws that could be broken during a Zoom bombing attack, and it all depends on the information that's shared during the Zoom bombing attack, and then also the way that people find out about the event, and then also the events that are being broken into. So, for instance, ones that break a federally protected event, such as court or education, that could be against a federal law. And also, if people are found to be discussing hacking a Bible study, for instance, that could be against a federal civil rights act that protects people's religious beliefs. And so she told me that she's looked through state civil rights laws in Washington and other states, and that some explicitly say that it applies to digital spaces, but that's not the case for Washington. And then I spoke with the Secretary of the Senate, and then also the House Secretary. They gave me a bunch of bills. I looked through them, and I could not find anything that applied to Zoom bombing or hacking video teleconferences. So from speaking with them, and then also Lauren Kraft, there are no known policies throughout Washington that apply to Zoom bombing. The only one that we could find was one that was recently passed in the King County Council on March the 9th, and that related to hacking and the interference of video teleconferences related to recovery meetings and mental health meetings. That was passed by Councilmember Reagan Dunn, who is an outspoken recovering alcoholic, and he's got years of sobriety under his belt. And he just heard from the community that a lot of people were being Zoom bombed during these recovery meetings, and he felt like it was really important when you're recovering to be able to have privacy and anonymity. So that's why he passed that. But there's no criminal, I guess, like repercussions for this. It just says that a person is allowed to file a civil lawsuit against someone for Zoom bombing their event.
Wow.
Damn, like recovery. That's so ill.
Yeah, and that's been such a sacred space for all this time. I mean, honestly, that's why it's, people go there for anonymity.
Yeah, well, so Melissa, what about you're saying what's not there, and clearly it seems like there's not a lot there. Is there any kind of movement that is underway? I mean, it seems like there's so many laws or regulations around cybersecurity, cyberbullying, harassment, and everything else. Is there a category or that this possibly might fit into, or legislation that's being worked on either here locally or nationally?
Yeah, so the Anti-Defamation League does have some model legislation that they've been working on, and that they've been trying to propose to different states. So there were a few states that have taken on their model legislation that started in 2019 called Backspace Hate, and it specifically relates to different forms of cyber harassment. And so they were able to convince Washington to pass a law recently that relates to swatting. So it prevents people from calling in and saying that some act happening at a person's place and then swatting happens there. We know that it happened to Ijeoma Oluo, the author here, after she wrote a book that people swatted her house as her her young son was there. So it can have deadly results, as we've seen in the past when the cops are called on people.
Yeah, you know what crazy, and I think Jenn hit on this in the beginning of the interview. Was just like, what if it was 51 people who rode up to your spot? You know what I'm saying? Who actually physically came into your meeting? 50 people want to talk. First of all, we already know these guys is real tough on the internet. You know what I'm saying? And real tame in person. And also, this is, you know, if you chase these IP addresses, these hits aren't coming from like, I'm sure maybe a small percent. They're not coming from the other side of the country. They're not coming from wherever. These are our neighbors, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
These are the people that we see at the grocery store. This is the bank teller. This might even be a teacher at a school and some of everything else. And, you know, I don't have the evidence directly to show that. But, you know, we see this increase in hate crimes that are happening locally. We're seeing all these things that are happening locally and everything else. And it kind of, you know, we live with this vision of this super liberal and accepting and yada yada and everything else out here, man. But time and again, we keep seeing it. That's not necessarily the case, Trey.
I mean, really, and there's a couple things here that I think are really spot on. Is that we know we were talking about with the internet in general, it just increased the level that people want to be digital warriors. You know what I'm saying? Pounding on their keyboards or whatever. And now with so many more people doing these video conferencing calls, they have another opportunity to do just that and spew their hate. But we all know, I mean, if it was us holding these meetings in person, we didn't really see a lot of this. It wasn't like they were rolling up and being like, you know, 50 deep, here we come, you know, with our messaging. That wasn't really happening, man. So you're absolutely right. And I think that too, your point is really valid. We saw it with the insurrection. We talk about it all the time, but the fact that so many of those folks were, you know, right here from Seattle, you know what I'm saying? We had law enforcement there, fire department there. At the end of the day, it's not too hard to understand, to follow those trends and think these are our neighbors right in our backyard.
Right. Well, before we let you guys go, Jenn, do you have any guidelines or best practice if someone is Zoom bombed?
Yeah, and I picked on that from the experts and also from people with lived experience. You know, before there's steps you can do before your meeting to you know, protect your password, to make sure that people are registering for your meeting if possible, so that you know, to have a co-host just to kind of like monitor what activity is happening, so you can easily, you know, shut people down if they try to do something out of line. And then, you know, after the meeting, if something does happen, you know, make sure you know the date, the time, the registration IDs for the meeting, a list of your participants, if you can turn that over to authorities. You know, and also it's one of the things I heard, especially from the schools and students that I spoke with, was just when you go to call for help, when you go to report these, because that's the thing, everyone says, you know, report these incidents. But when the people on the other end aren't either trained or maybe could say the wrong thing during a very sensitive moment, that could really affect how people respond and how they feel, whether they feel protected when an incident like this occurs, because it is very painful, even though it happened online and no one was punching you in the face or anything. But, you know, those words hit hard. And so you expect some sympathy or empathy from people, but also that they have training to know how to report it correctly, and how they choose to respond and announce it. And I think the trouble with when this happens to communities that have experienced this onslaught and ongoing, you know, hate, that it adds up, and it's it's not enough for them to say like, okay, we're going to have a task force meeting. We're going to look at this, we're against it. What other things are you really doing in your community group, in your campus, in your organization, in your government to protect people against, racism and or other forms of oppression, xenophobia, whatever it is. It's really about creating that cultural shift. So how you talk about it before, during, and after also really matters just as much as those actions of investigation.
All right. Man, thank you guys both for taking the time this morning, and a real important article. And we'll put that link in the comments once again for our audience so they can click on that link and read everything in depth. Jenn Smith, Melissa Hellmann, both from the Seattle Times. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Trey.
Wow. I mean,
Man,
they really went in depth.
They reporting hat on.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing about it is that this is a growing trend. This is something that we're seeing. But when we talk about a new avenue, well, no, I'm just saying, when we talk about a new avenue for hate, here we are. These video conferencing calls, they can call them Zoom bombings. But as they said there, that is not just about Zoom. It's in any of these formats where people are doing these kind of video conference calls. It's man, they went real deep.
Just want to live, man. I mean, when you talk about, it's like, okay, I gotta get a VPN, a proxy server, or this. I mean, it's a lot. You know what I'm saying? People are going through to do all of this, and I mean, this is local.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I'm saying. But we talk about it all the time. I mean, you experience these things, for us, it was these, they coined the term microaggressions, right? Where you would just experience them in public. But again, it wasn't blatant. A lot of people weren't like, what, N-word, they weren't doing necessarily that. But now, those microaggressions are coming out in a digital format.
A lot of people feeling themselves on the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They feeling themselves on the internet. And I'm telling you, I promise you, a lot of these same people who are here on the internet, Zoom bomb, man, these are our neighbors. These are people that we be around, the people we work with, some of everything else. It's a bigger issue going on that I think a lot of people don't want to realize or recognize of what's happening. We're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, like I said, talk to School Board Director for District 7, Brandon Hersey. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
Public Health Seattle King County, Zero Youth Detention, along with our partners from across the South King County region, are committed to reducing violence and creating the conditions needed for our neighborhoods to be safe and free of crime. Too often, the response to crime and violence has been a piecemeal approach with a program here and a program there. When family units collapse, schools fail to educate, the economy fails to produce jobs, and crime rises, we've looked to law enforcement and punitive measures to save us. Nothing could be more wrong or further from the truth. Law enforcement can't shoulder all the burden or take the rest of us off the hook. We are acknowledging the lived experiences of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. We are centering community as the experts who can effectively identify key issues related to systems, policies, and practices that impact children, families, and communities of color across this region. Those most impacted by the issues will help call out and identify the root causes, including structural and systemic factors. 150 residents will partner with King County to develop strategies, solutions, and an action plan that explicitly addresses system changes needed and eliminates barriers to access for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. These residents will also identify the criteria used to measure our collective success. Simply put, we need your help as we do the work needed to make King County the safest in this country. It will take specific commitments from all of us, community members, our young people, elders, and leaders from the sectors all across this region. Together, we will get this work done. Please click the link below and sign up for a work group. Or you can recommend a co-facilitator from community for each work group. We look forward to hearing your ideas, concerns, feedback, and solutions as we build a community where all our children can be happy, healthy, hopeful, safe, and thriving.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. As I said, I spoke earlier to Seattle School Board Director for District 7, Brandon Hersey, about the initial feedback of grades 6 through 12 returning to school and what parents can expect for the next few weeks until school ends.
So the feedback that we've gotten across the system, K-12, is that folks are just excited to be back. So many kids have been missing those social interactions, not only with their teachers, but with other students as well. And really, folks are just really happy to return to some sense of normalcy. But what I will say is that we are still very much so not out of this pandemic. The European variant, the UK variant is still running rampant. For me, I woke up this morning with a sore throat, and even though I'm fully vaxxed, I was really, really nervous that I had something going on. So I think that that's an anxiety that a lot of our families, and especially our Black families, are sharing, because we know that there is still a ton of disparities that impact our communities harder than others. But what I can say is that for all of the students who I've had contact with and their families who have returned, they're just excited to be around other kids again. You know what I'm saying? So I'm excited about that piece. What I want folks to remember is that even though we are reopening our physical buildings to some students, there are still many of our students who have elected to stay remote. And so they should still be receiving the same quality of education, if not better, that they were receiving before we opened our doors. It's going to be critical that we make sure that we are still providing as much as we can for all of our students, regardless of the educational environment that they elected to be in. What I will say is, as our kids continue to come back, is please, parents, make sure that you are having those same conversations about social distancing, hand washing, all of that stuff, because it's going to be critical to make sure that we can continue to have our schools open in a safe and manageable way, especially heading into the fall.
That's right. Tell them kids to keep washing their hands. Like, cooties is real.
I mean, well, he's right. This is, an opportunity here, but we want to play it safe so that coming into the school year next year, kids can try to get some resemblance of normalcy once again. I know my son returns tomorrow and he's excited. He's like, all right, Mom, now I need to get some new pants. I say, yeah, you can't be wearing your pajama pants to school, man.
I know that's right. Speaking of school, I was in Chicago over the weekend. I got to catch up with Omi. We used to call him Little O around here, and then it was Young O, and now it's Omi. I think he's going to be on that for a minute. For you guys that don't know, my son is a sophomore at Loyola University in Chicago, and he's studying broadcasting. He's getting ready to move out of his apartment. He was in the camera was there when he moved into this first apartment. Remember, we had the keys and everything. And usually we do our segment, Struggle Meals Without the Struggle, which we've been following O in the kitchen and his wins and many losses. But this time, I was fortunate enough to catch up with O, and he was actually shooting a video for school, but he was shooting the video along with his roommate, Breon Price. And Breon is actually from Chicago, and he launched a clothing line. It's called Born Chicago, and it means be original, reject negativity. And an amazing conversation that I had there with Breon, shared with me that back in high school, one of his friends died, was murdered there, gun violence. And one of the things that was important, or that is important to Breon, is that Chicago can go back to being a city where kids feel safe. It's like kids don't feel safe, but kids should be able to be a kid, and people who love and are into their art should be able to stick with their art and be supported. So anyways, this is just a short clip here, some behind the scenes footage of Omi and Breon, and they're doing their, he's getting some B-reel, as he says, big time director over there, for part of this video that he's working on. And hopefully when it's done, we'll see the finished product.
So right now I got to get more B-roll footage for this video project I'm doing. It's this brand marketing video I had to do for my introduction to video, but it's like specially based introduction to video. So it's introduction for video for journalism. So right now I'm doing a video for my friend Breon, because he has a clothing brand called Born that he's trying to start. So we got him talking about what Born means to him, what's it really about, and now we're just getting the footage to go with everything he's talking about. Because he mentions Chicago a lot and the Chicago art scene. So I figured we'd get some graffiti shots, then just more like shots of like artists doing their crafts at work, and then we'll see how this really turns out.
So Born Chicago is all about being original and rejecting negativity. You know, growing up in Chicago, it's a real negative environment, you know, dealing with gun violence and stuff like that. So a lot of people will turn to doing arts to escape the negativity. So one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people, as they grow up in the city of Chicago, they tend to let go of their arts or their talents because they don't fit in or people aren't supporting them enough. So really what Born Chicago is all about is just being yourself, embracing who you are as a person, and enjoying the talents and things that you do in life.
So now Trey Holiday, Born Chicago, it launches in May, and we're gonna have to support this young man on his endeavor. And that's actually really dope. Be original, reject negativity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hands down, what a positive message. And one of the things that I love so much is seeing young people go after their dreams. I mean, here you have Omi, you know, almost said young O. Here you have Omi behind the camera doing what he loves. You have his roommate there, Breon Price, right? Doing what he loves and also really representing Chicago. And Omi here, you know, representing a family legacy of media moguls. And I just love it. I love seeing that clip. I love to be able, when we check in with Omi, with how he's doing down there. Looks like the sun was shining. It wasn't too cold. He still had a sweatshirt on. But you know what I'm saying? It's a great way to really celebrate young folks when they're really doing what they love.
I'll be honest with you. Seeing O and Breon thriving in their space and thriving in their purpose, it was just a recharge and invigorating for me. You see it, I came back with a new dress code and everything. You know what I'm saying? It was really dope. You know, and so we're gonna check back in with O, and hopefully he'll send us his finished product there. And then, like I said, Born Chicago launches in May. It's clothing gear, so you know we're gonna have to support that. You can follow Born Chicago on Instagram. I think it's born.chicago.
Oh, I love it. You know, and I also got to say too, man, you know, kudos to Loyola University. I mean, to be able to do something like that for class, you know, that's, you know, I know back in my time, man, it was like, you got to get this certain shot. You got to learn how to pen, learn how to do this.
Believe me, they on his head like that.
I love it. I love it. It's very creative.
I told, you know, I studied geology in school. And so if you haven't met one before, it's a black geologist who's sitting right next to you. Geology and environmental science. But I just always loved media. I did radio in college. And I told, I was like, son, I spent a career of burning my hands, you know, trial and error and everything. And I tell people all the time, I said, man, if you think that what we're doing here at Converge is a big deal, wait till you see my son. Right. Because he's learning it young. You know what I'm saying? He's learning all these things young, man. That boy's gonna be amazing.
I love it, man. I'm glad. I can't wait to see the final product. Omi, make sure we get it, bro.
Yeah, man. Any last words before we get out of here, Trey?
You know, always, I think one of the uplifting messages that I'm going to continue to leave you guys with is to see yourself as a part of the solution. Definitely. I think it's so important because all of these solutions really take a wide variety of diverse thought, perspectives, upbringing, background. I mean, you got to bring yourself into the solution in order to create the change you want to see.
There it is. Yeah. Woot. There it is.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Before we get out of here, got to give a big shout out to producer Nikki Barron. She came out of hiatus, man. You know, she was in the sun for a few weeks and everything, and she had to shake it off. The coronavirus update show was on last night. You can find that show, I guess, everywhere. It's even on our podcast, everything else. A great show last night. And we're actually, the show is now going to be every Monday, every Monday, 6:15. So, you know, we did coronavirus update last night. And also just want to continuously thank our supporters out there. I mean, you guys keep us on air. We appreciate you. We appreciate everything that you guys do, whether it's sharing the stream, or reposting, your positive comments, donations, everything else. Just know that sincerely, we appreciate you. Before we get out of here, as usual, want to encourage everybody. Go forward in your purpose and go forward in your humanity. And until tomorrow at 11 a.m., peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day.